Paul Payne, Alan Ekstrand, Jennifer Fearing.
Mr. President, members of the Commission, Ed Worley with the National Rifle Association. I thought I'd come here today and give you a little bit of an update on our continuing efforts to find out information about all the research and everything that's been done and due to about lead bullets and condors. One of the things we found fascinating, I've handed out a handout for all of you to look through and go through. The thing we've been finding very fascinating is on numerous occasions when we've requested the data from the research people, including the research personnel that the Department of Fish and Game has hired, apparently there's been patterns where the original data, the raw data, has been destroyed, which we find a little troubling. Also, we found instances where when we've requested very specific data about the raw data, about what they found in the research, one of the researchers responded it would take up to 80 weeks for them to respond with the information. When we asked the question why, they admitted that they don't have the information archived or sorted in any manner that anybody can find it. One of the researchers responded, well, we have it all in a box someplace, it's all disorganized, it's on a laptop that somebody else has, and they cannot find the data, which I find extremely troubling because this is a critical issue for all of us to understand the true science about what's going on. If this research information, this raw data that's being collected by these research personnel is not being archived, if it's not being put someplace where the public can get to it, or other researchers and scientists can get to it, that's extremely troubling. One of the things is that when we ask for the data, we're asking to find out so we can have other research personnel that we're looking to and talking to do peer review research on the raw data that they have found. What we have found in some cases is they are cherry picking the data. They're modeling the data. We don't want the model data. We don't want the cherry picked data. We want the raw data. I come from an aerospace engineering background, and all the way through college when I was doing all my aerospace engineering activities, one thing that was stressed to me over and time again by my professors is science is science, data is data, no matter what you do. Because you can't replicate the studies and you cannot replicate the science and the assumptions that are being made, also that the assertions that are being made, unless you have the raw data that the other scientists can look through. So what we've done is we've put together a letter for you to look at, and one of the things we're going to ask you and the Commission to consider is there needs to be some kind of standardization of archiving the data. There needs to be some kind of standardization of where the data is. Who has it? Apparently one of the researchers, when they finished doing their paper, they decided that they were going to destroy all the raw data and all their data they used to write the paper. That was appalling to me. Because how can anybody in the future go look at that data, in the future, go back and replicate the research, go back and look what they're talking about? We're talking about saving the condors. All of us have differing opinions on how we want to do that. But for the science to move forward and for the science to know what's going on, all this data needs to be archived someplace. The things here you need to consider yourself is UC Davis, the Department of Fish and Game, you hired the UC Davis researchers to do some research, which is a very good idea. We asked them for some of the raw data after they published their articles. They are refusing to give data that you paid to be collected, that you paid to be analyzed, and you paid to be a report. They are refusing to give that data to the citizens of the state of California, which I don't think is right. Because as I've said before, and I've said numerous times, my background as an engineer, science and data is data and science is science. It's very simple. So we're asking you, the Fish and Game also should consider talking to UC Davis researchers and have that data released to the public, put it on our archived website so everybody can get to the data so we can all look at the data and analyze the data independently. Thank you very much for your time.
Commissioner Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ed is bringing up something that's, if true, quite troubling, actually, to me, because we should be living and dying on the science. I'd like to ask the department if they have a response to that, the commentary. I can't see down the table there.
Good morning, Commissioners. First off, I have to say the Department of Fish and Game doesn't control how the professors behave that don't work for us. But second, one of the things, we do contract work with university all the time, and actually, coincidentally, we're right in the middle of negotiations which is being led by Department of General Services on this whole issue of intellectual property. One of the sub-contexts here that's going on is the university has a pretty strong tradition and attitude that they control any data they generate. Part of it's, for their own work and analysis and publication. And just so you know, we're essentially not contracting anymore with the university system on research until we resolve this issue about data ownership, etc. So it's actually an issue up front and center right now, but we don't know where it's going. But this is an issue. It's about access to original data that's generated under contract.
Well, if I may, thank you, Sankey. Mr. President, may I continue?
Yeah, go ahead, and then Commissioner Sutton.
Well,
hey, wait a minute, Ed.
Yeah, you may. The reason I say this, and I think Ed is bringing up something that's a very salient point, I think everyone who has followed this issue knows the importance of the issue. It has broad implications not only for the Condor area, but for other areas of California. Should lead projectiles or of any kind, or particles of lead, be ingested into the by animals or birds or you pick it, should that be proven to be a problem? Well, the only way that's going to be proven to be a problem is if the science is good, is concentrated, and is available. And I completely agree with the point about raw data. So if I can only represent myself here on the commission, but I'm reasonably certain that every one of my commissioners would be very interested to be very certain, since this issue is of such great importance, not only to the sporting community, but to those of us who are charged with the wildlife of the state of California, that this data be very good, very available, and that we do as much as we can to focus on this issue, because as things become obvious to us, we want to be able to act on that either way. Thank you, Mr. President.
Commissioner Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Ed, for bringing this situation to our attention. No doubt we all want to know what exactly the impact of lead ammunition is in these conditions, leaving aside the issue of how science can be manipulated by various parties in the debate. I'll tell you how I approach this issue. It seems to me that we ought to establish a rebuttable presumption here, the presumption being that it would be better to shoot non-toxic ammunition in sensitive state wildlife areas and ecological preserves than to continue chucking ammunition that's made from a toxic heavy metal across our state lands. Now, that's a rebuttable presumption. If the science shows that there is no problem with lead, fine, we don't have to take action. But I'm assuming it would be better for all of us who care about wildlife, hunters or not, to shoot non-toxic ammunition, particularly if it's just as effective as toxic heavy metal-based ammunition. Now, if the science can disprove that presumption, great. If the science confirms that that's the right way to go, that's fine too. Your point is we need to know, and I accept that.
And I'm not going to say I told you so. Commissioner Bailiff.
Thanks, Chair. Something I'd like to add is to, though I agree with Commissioner Sutton, too quickly we can move to a different problem. And I was reading a report on tungsten, which is being considered. Well, it turns out when tungsten degrades in soil, it with sulfur compounds, it can cause another toxin. So I think before we run to another one, we've got to understand that. There's a 3-year study on tungsten going on right now, I think by the National Institute of Health. So let's not run to the wrong thing.
What Ed brought to our attention, though, that the bottom line is true and real science. I mean, it's eggs don't cause cholesterol because the science wasn't true science that was saying that. And the same thing happened, and the commissioner on my right even admitted it later on when I said that the science was not true science when we outlawed the lead in the Condor area in the first place. So we need to be able to rely on real deal instead of phony stuff.
Mr. President, in my experience, true and real science tends to be the science that one agrees with. And if you don't agree with science, some people call it junk science and so forth. But it is important to have access to the data, there's no doubt. And Commissioner Bayless, I think, brings up an important point. I shoot non-toxic ammunition for everything, whether it's required or not, because it's consistent with, our position here. And one of the things I've been trying is heavy shot, the so-called heavy shot for shotgun shells, which is very effective, but it's made from bismuth and tungsten and all kinds of things that if we're going to, your point, I think, Commissioner Bayless, is if we're going to move to non-toxic ammunition, we ought to make sure it's actually non-toxic. And I think that's a good point.
If I may chime in, this whole thing reminds me, thank you, Commissioner Bayless, for bringing this up. This reminds me of how the state of Hawaii thought it was going to eradicate its rats. They ended up with a bigger problem.
Thank you very much, Commissioners.
Thank you.